Okay, now that we have all the in-betweens in, and we've gone through and looked at the arcs and seeing how the motion is, there's a lot of little things that we need to tweak now. We need to go in and finesse it a little bit so that it looks right. There's really kind of floating holds. There's things where he should be holding a pose, and he's kind of floating through some things. I've got all my keyframes showing right here. Wherever I have any keyframe or in between, I've got it all sitting right here. Now, usually when I go into do this, I'm going to go into the graph editor. The reason why I do that is because I like to see better what things are doing, and I kind of start from the root out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to zoom in a bit in my timeline, and I'm just going to click on a few of these to just kind of look at the arcs and stuff. Now, if you have it set to auto scale in the Y, it's going to look really flat unless you click on each one of them individually. If you uncheck that, if you hit Z, you can really zoom in far. Let me do this again real quick here. You can zoom in and do this, and then when you pan, you can kind of notice what it looks like a little bit better. Let me give you a good example like this. I can squish it this way, I can make it bigger or smaller. It just kind of depends on how you like to do it. I just kind of keep it centered on the Y, and I just kind of make the window bigger so I can see what's going on. So what we've got here is we've got this pelvis bone, and this is just kind of, or the body bone, and this is just kind of what's going on here. And so if I look at rotate X, rotate Y, looks decent, rotate Z, W, translate. Now this is kind of where you'll start to see things going kind of weird. Now this is translating the X, so it's actually, if you look right here in the corner, if you look right here, it's coming this way. So if I rotate it, you'll see which way it's going. It's this direction for it. So I'm going to go to the translate X and just shrink it down a little bit. Back to my camera. And as I'm scrubbing through, I'm looking, I want him to go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Okay, now one thing that I want to make sure that's going on here is if I zoom, so I can really see that. You can see each one of these. This is up, down, up, down. But this is in the X. I don't really want it moving a whole lot in the X, so I'm just going to grab this, kind of move it down. Do this right there. If I go to my Y view, you can notice now here's where it really comes into play. I want him up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and hold it there. Okay. Now, when we're talking about holds, one thing you'll notice is you'll notice that the spline goes down past and comes back, past and comes back, past and comes back. Now, that's nice in some instances, but in a lot of them, we want them to really lock in. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go back to keyframe mode, and I'm just going to click on bones, and so I can see all of them where they are. Now, all of these are fine. And one thing right here that I want to do is I actually want to go right here, copy that frame, paste it. Oops. It's going to take some time here. Okay. The reason why I did that, and then I'm going to paste it here too. So it kind of holds it there instead of having this continual arc. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. Without these keyframes here, notice how the arc kind of tends to go up. Let me undo that. It kind of helps it to flatten out. Now I can grab these and I can move them back this way and grab this one and move it that way. And now we've got a lot more flat. This may not be the best example, but like a real good example is the hands. If I look right here, let me go back into here, and I'm just going to do delete that, and go back here and delete that. Now if I go back to my graph editor, you'll notice, see how all these curves are really dipping and really overshooting because they're just going along with the spline. Now I can play with the spline itself if I wanted to, but I'd rather actually put some keyframes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to about right here, copy, paste, and then I'm going to go over here and hit paste. So now what we did is we held it. It's somewhat of a moving hold. It doesn't go so still, but it doesn't overshoot so far. It keeps moving just a little bit. If you notice his hands right in here, they keep moving just a little bit, and his body keeps moving just a little bit, but not as much as it did without those. If I go and I delete them again, and then go back here and I delete that again, you'll notice how it moves a lot further, and see how his hands kind of overshoot. And I don't want him to do that, so once again I'm going to just hit copy paste, and I'm going to go over here and hit paste. Okay, so that solves that overshoot quite a bit. Stuff, and he kind of holds it there, but he keeps moving, so it's a nice moving hold where you don't have to lock him into place. Now this is a good example right here. See how his hand actually overshoots. If you watch the bone, it passes the IK, and so his arm goes straight out and it locks his elbow and then comes back. I don't want him to actually do that. I want him to keep this position right here. I just want to go right here, so I'm going to hit copy, paste, and I'm going to go over here and hit paste. Okay, so he goes bam. So he still moves a little bit, but you can notice how it's not going so far that it totally overextends the IK. But he hits that, and then comes back. Okay. It's mainly in these long gaps where you're holding something. Like there too, you see how his elbow goes way too far. So I'm just going to go out a couple frames, copy and paste it, and then I'm going to come back and paste it there. Okay. So you still get that kind of moving hold where it's not totally still. Okay. Now this right here, I actually want him to snap into this a little quicker than that. I don't want him to go up and straight into it. I want him to hold this right here for just a couple frames. So I'm actually going to copy that, just paste it there. And so what he'll do is the computer will automatically calculate a little bit of an overshoot for you, but keeping it almost in the same place. And what I could do is I could actually just hit delete, go back here, copy, paste it one more out. That. So now he holds this a little bit longer and hits here quicker. Now I want him to hold this a little bit, and that is. I don't want him to pull back until he says is. Okay, so I'm going to copy this frame and paste it about right there. And what you'll get is you'll get kind of this wind up into it. But you'll notice see how the control hand kind of pulled away from the arm, straightening it out too much. So what I'm going to do is actually grab this one, copy, paste, and I'm actually going to paste it here. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. I'm going to actually delete that one, and I'm going to delete this one. just going to copy this one, paste it here, and then paste it here too. And then paste it there. So I don't quite get that overshoot. But now that I look at this, what I might want to do, and this is the thing about finessing this. A lot of it's just trial and error, and a lot of it is just figuring out where things are supposed to be. That doesn't look good. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it that way. Now here's one where it just overextends a little too much. So I'm going to copy that, paste it right there. Now if I click on this hand, you'll notice this is one thing that you'll want to check. I'm actually going to copy this one and I'm going to paste it right here. What I'm doing is let me delete that. I'm just going to copy this, paste it right here. Now there's too little movement right there. It's the same keyframe and it's just flattened it out. So I'm actually going to just go to this one, get rid of it, back to this one, get rid of it. I'm going to copy there. Actually, I'm going to go to right here, copy, paste, and then right here, paste. So now we still get a little bit of movement in there. But let's just check all the splines. So I'm actually going to open it up on all of these. Rotate, that's fine, that's fine. Now this, you'll notice, is a little whacked out. That one looks good, that one looks good. This one looks a little bit weird, so I'm actually going to just smooth it out a little bit. Check this one, that looks decent. Another thing that you can do is just kind of move the keys around. You don't have to use the bias. You can just move the keys around just slightly. Let's do translate. Sometimes you'll notice, see how this is really kind of wonky here. I'm just going to straighten it out. Same thing with this. Same thing with this. I don't want that little overshoot going, so I'm just going to kind of shrink it down a little bit. Okay. But this way, now one thing you'll notice is his elbow kind of pops there. I want to just make sure that this spline is nice and smooth, because his elbow will pop there. So I got rid of it. So what happened is this was like this, and with this curve goes up and down. As it goes up, it extends too far and you get a double bounce in his elbow. So I just want to just smooth it out a little bit, make sure it works right. Okay. Let's check his other hand real quick right in here. So rotate. That looks fine. A little bit dip into it. Rotate Y, that's fine. Z is fine. That's fine, that's fine. This one may be a little bit weird. Let's just straighten that out a little bit. Translate Z. Just bring that in a little bit. The thing you want to look for is you want your curves to be smooth, unless you want a sharp change in direction. If you want a sharp change in direction, that's fine. But other than that, you want them in a smooth path. So if I have, if this keyframe for some reason is sitting down here, I don't want that to happen. I want to have it, a nice gradual thing like that. I don't want it to pop. And so when you look at your graph, when you see it kind of out of whack like this, it means it's kind of popping. One way you can oops. One way you can make sure that things are right is, say I delete this keyframe. If I just click in there to create a keyframe, I can then make one on on the spline and redo it the way I want it to. So okay, so in this, let's check his elbows for their rotations. Now they only rotate in the Y, and so that's what I'm going to check here. They look pretty good. Okay, well let's go back to let me check this other elbow real quick. Yeah, it looks pretty decent. Let's go back to the entire character here. So we made sure we came in here, we set our keyframes right here. Okay. Now he hits this pose, he overshoots a little bit and comes back. And I don't want his elbow to lock like that, so I'm actually going to go out. I'm going to copy this one, paste it, and then I'm also going to go over here and paste it. Let's see how it pops like that. I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is make sure that this comes in there. This comes in like that. That one's fine. The translate is a big one because I don't want it translating. I want him to just ease into it. There we go. That's looking better. I don't have to do it completely zero slope. I could just select it and say interpolation method zero slope, but I don't want it to just go straight into it. So I'm just going to say back to spline. And I like to just kind of play with my splines a little bit so that they're a little less whacked out. That way then I can go over to here where I put that one keyframe and I can just delete it out because I don't need it anymore. The problem is that it was coming like this and dipping down and then coming back. I don't need that anymore. So okay, so now you can see where his hands go too far because of this spline right here going up and then down, going into the next one. So I'm going to go out a few frames, copy that, and then I'm going to go out here and I'm going to go paste. So it's kind of still, and then he goes into his motion. And that way the spline stays pretty flat until it hits right here. One of the reasons why I'm actually grabbing out here versus on the keyframe is because if I grab the keyframe and put it here, I'm going to get a non-moving hold. It's going to be really stiff. And so I try and grab keyframes from wherever I think I want the motion to lead. See right here, it's a good, he kind of holds it until he goes down and then he brings his hands up. Okay. Okay, so now, one thing while I'm doing this, you'll notice I only have one bone clicked, or one bone selected. And what that does is it allows me to just look at the curves on that bone, but I have the key model button down. So when I'm copying and pasting, I'm actually copying every frame on every bone, or every key on every bone at that point, and then pasting it. It's not just on the hand. It's actually on the entire model, but I'm using these curves to see what's going on. So, okay, now I want to look at, this is a good little section here because it's a large amount of movement, and I want to look at the way rotations are especially. So if I look here, rotate X, you notice how this is a little funky here. It's a little kind of dip in there, and I don't want that dip to happen. I actually want it pretty smooth. I'm going to shrink it just so it makes more sense here. I'm going to bring it up a little bit, and this one up just a little bit too. So I'm getting kind of a nice smooth curve into this. Pull this one down a little bit. That's much better. So let's go to rotate X, kind of do the same thing. See a trend here. You want to make this spline as smooth as you can. And rotate Z. Now this one especially, I don't want to do that. I actually want it to be kind of somewhere in the middle, but I want it to be nice and smooth. So I'm going to do this. Let's see what this does right here. I want it to go back about here. This one, I want it to kind of droop down too, so it kind of goes. Okay, let's look at rotate W. I'm going to grab that, kind of bring it down. This one, bring it up just a little bit. I'm just smoothing out my curves so that they look right. Okay, so let's look at translate real quick. Notice how it's a little bit of a curve's not very nice. So I'm just working with the curves here, trying to make them look right. Okay, translate Y, same kind of thing. Just want the curve to be correct. And translate Z, that looks fine. So that hand in that little section is pretty much what I want. So let's go to the other hand real quick. Okay, so rotate. Let's look at this. Looks decent. I'd take this one up just a little bit. This one, just kind of smooth this curve out a little bit. There we go. Make sure that your bias is correct. I try to not touch the bias unless I absolutely have to. Mainly because it can get really touchy when you start getting into how it affects the rest of the curve. So this one I want kind of to come down. Same kind of thing. Translate, same kind of thing. Put a little higher. Just to kind of come into it. If you double click on it, it gives you all the details of what's going on. You can change it that way. I don't use it a whole lot, but okay, so let's do this. Bring this one up a little bit. Just make sure this is nice and smooth. Z looks fine. Okay, so those look pretty good. Let's check the elbows here. Rotate. Y is about the only one. Y and W are about the only ones that you want to deal with because they're locked in. Okay. Let's do this one. Looks pretty good. Smooth. Doing this too, you can get rid of a lot of those kind of solid holds. You can see keyframes that are really close to each other and just offset one a little bit, so it's not so blatantly obvious that you copy and paste. So what I usually do is in areas of big motion like this, I'll go through kind of all the bones and just check them, just to make sure that one looks good. Let's go to this one. That one looks good. Spine. Now this one, you can see it's kind of wonky. Kind of a nice curve going here. Y. It's a little too linear, and I want it to be a little more curved. Okay, rotate Z, same kind of thing. See how it's really straight right here, and I don't want I want it moving in arcs. So I want to kind of get it moving in an arc. Okay. That's the one I just checked. Let's check his neck. The neck and the head are really important because they there's a lot of movement in them. Right here is a good example. This spline, the keyframe's in the right place, but the spline interpolation got kind of jacked up on it. So I'm actually just going to grab it and move it there. This one, I don't want the neck moving a whole lot. If you notice when I move this, how the neck rotation moves, I don't want it moving a whole lot in the rotation, so I'm going to get it as level as I can. This one, I'm going to kind of ease into it. And this one, kind of the same thing. So, now one thing I want to do here is check this, especially to translate Y. What I'm doing right here is, this is when he comes down. So he comes down and up into his movement. So I actually want this down to be down even further. And then this is up. And I want this one to be up, and this one to be kind of up, and this one a little less, and then this one where he comes down and then back up. So if you look at your curves, you can get a lot of exaggeration going. The way I had it before, there wasn't a whole lot of movement, but I want a lot more movement in this one. So I want him to actually drop down a little bit more. I'm actually going to come back a little bit here. It's a little too much. We'll do this. There we go. Let's get this kind of set correctly. If you use your arrow keys, you can actually take a keyframe and move it back and forth. I don't do that a whole lot. I'll grab it and actually move it. But okay, so that's fine. Translate Z, translate Y, X. This is a little weird here. So I just want to get it. W's fine. Rotate, rotate. I didn't rotate those at all. Let's look at the base spine here. Now I'm just giving you a small shot of what I do on the entire animation. This is really flat right here, and I want it to be a little bit more. Actually, I don't want any rotation there. Well, yeah, it is the rotate X that I want. This, let's see what happens. No, undo that. I do want the X, because that's the forward and the back. So I actually want him to do this and then come way up like this. So now he kicks back a lot farther and then comes forward a lot further. This right here, lower it down a little bit. About there. Do that so he kind of comes into it. Now one thing I'm noticing is the hands, they're a little too close to the body right here. If I go to my translate, that's forward and back. That's a little more what I want. So translate Z. So if I go to my translate Z here too. So there. And that rotation, I'm not really keen on this, on either of the rotations on here. So what I'm going to do, I don't like that rotation. That doesn't look real. So I'm actually just going to grab it, hit R to rotate, and I'm going to pull it out a bit. Kind of like this. And this one, same kind of thing. Just going to pull it out a little bit so it's not so bent at the wrist. So now what I can do is I can actually click on them, go into each of these, and now I can really see where my rotations were. So it's basically this one right here. I want that to be kind of down that way. This one. Okay, so this one too. X is fine, Y is fine, Z, and W. It's this one right here I kind of want to come out like this. Okay, just make sure the bias is fine on this. Okay, so I think that's more of what I want. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is you can notice here, there's a big gap between all the keyframes. I'm going to copy about right here, paste. I'm going to paste about here. Now as I'm pasting, straight, now I want to copy this one. So now I've got, well, actually let's do this. Let's get a moving hold in here. So I'm going to copy one of these, paste it back down here so he's still moving. And then he's going to kick into this one. So he's going to overshoot right here and go into his motion. But I want him to do a little more extreme. So he goes, that hold down is a little more extreme. So I'm actually just going to force a keyframe right there. And then I'm going to go to my translate Y here. And I'm going to dip it down. I'm just going to kind of work my way. Actually want it to do that. Let's go to this one. Same kind of thing. Just making these a little more extreme. Neck. A little more extreme here. The neck and the head, you can always go a lot more. Oops, rotate X. I want that head to really let's really hit it here. So that way, I don't know if I want it that far, so I'm going to back it off a little bit. We want a little bit of an arc here. Actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the neck do most of the work. The head's a little bit too much of a bob. There we go. Okay. I try and work some animators when you are doing this. Um, some animators don't care to just start putting in keyframes and putting them wherever they want, things like that. I'm kind of a stickler for messiness. I can't stand it, and so I tend to just key everything at those points where I want to add detail to an animation, just because I don't want floating keyframes everywhere. I don't want to have to deal with, oh man, there's a key. What's that one keyframe on? Because when you go into this mode right here, and I click on bones, all of these things, if I have this shrunk down and there's a tick mark right here, that will show up. That key will show up even if it's only on one bone, way down in here somewhere. It'll still show up right here, and I'll think I have a keyframe there, but then I've got to go fishing around for it. So whenever I want to set a keyframe, I always just key the entire model and key everything at one time, even if it's just small. The data size doesn't matter if you're just animating for a render. For a game it does, but in a game you keyframe everything anyways, because you don't want stuff floating around or the game engine freaking out on you. So let's click on them again here. Oh, I clicked bones in graph mode. I gotta wait for a second. Let's go back here and let's just click on a hand and then do this. Okay, so we just did the head and the spine. Okay, so right here I really want to focus a little bit on the body bone. So I'm not doing any rotate, but I want to do this. So and then he overshoots and then comes back. Now this arc needs to be up higher, and this one can be even higher. And this one I'm going to drop even lower. So he really goes up and then comes down. Okay. So these two are... Now this one right here, I actually don't want him to come down until about right here. I want to hold this keyframe, so I'm going to actually, you have to click off of something. If you have any keyframe selected, it's going to just copy that keyframe. It's not going to copy the whole thing. So you have to click off something, click back on it. Now this may be fixed in newer versions, but go to where I want, copy that, paste it here. And maybe I don't want it right there. I actually want it a little further back, so I'm just going to do that. Now this, I almost want lower. So I just want him to kind of level off into where he turns around. Okay, so now let's go to the spine. Let's look at the hands too. Let's look at the translate. So this, if you'll notice, the translate Y is it's kind of jacked up. Let's get a nice curve going here. I think what's actually happening is it's translating up at the same rate that the body is translating down, and so it makes it. Let's see what we're doing here. Go back up here. Okay, now that rotation's bad right there. I need to look at the rotations here on it, on this hand. Smooth that one out. Make sure that comes down. That one's okay. This one's okay. Okay. Okay, so this is the one I want to kind of look at. Kind of get a smooth curve going here. Okay, let's look at the translate here. Now translate X is kind of what I want to look at. I really want it to kind of I don't want it to sit in place like that. So I want to. Now you'll notice here, this bias is totally whacked out. So I need to fix it. So that's what I want it to do. I want it to come down quicker. Not lock the elbow, but come down quicker. Smooth it out there. Now rotations, this rotation's really kind of nasty right there. I think it's rotation Y. It's giving it issues. Yeah, I need it to come out. There we go. But it's translation. Do this real quick. Okay. So, as I'm looking at these curves, I want to make sure that they are right. Let me look at this hand real quick. Okay, this bias is a little screwed up. Give it a nicer curve here. Okay, rotation Z. Notice how the bias is a little messed up. Yeah, this is why I don't like messing with bias. And I'm going to go ahead and save this one. And I'm going to actually just reload the choreography. When you start to get things like that, a lot of times the software is just getting a little strange. So I'm actually going to pause it and restart it here. So just a second. Okay, I'm back, and yeah, it looks like it was just the software was doing some funky stuff. So, because this is the one that was having the problem before, and now it's not. So I'm just gonna kind of smooth these out a bit, make sure they're all working fine. Now that one had a problem, so I'm actually going to correct it. Okay, this looks fine. Fine. Okay, so let's look at the head and the neck real quick here. I don't see any major popping issues here. Just look at the curves. Just give it a little more. A little better curvature coming into these. Okay, drag this one down a little more. This one up a little bit. I'm just kind of smoothing these curves out because as I look at them, I just want to make sure that there's not major bumps or anything in them. That one's fine. Zoom in here real quick. Make sure that the bias is correct on these. And that it's working. Now you don't want to get rid of all these little overshoots right here. That gives you a little bit of anticipation, like built-in anticipation for your movement. So you don't really want to get rid of those. In fact, sometimes you want to accentuate them a little bit, like I am here. Okay, move that down a little bit. Maybe move this one up a little bit more. This one up a little bit more, so he overshoots just slightly. Okay, that's all looking good. Now these, the bias is a little weird on them, so I'm just going to kind of flatten them out a bit, bring them up a little bit. This one, the bias is huge. I'm going to just shrink it down so it's nice. Now, one thing I'm noticing, we didn't fix this hand right here, where it says, "It's disgusting," like we did the other one. So I'm actually going to go to translate Y, and I'm going to drag this one down. There we go. So now just make sure that these are all put in correctly. Let's form Z. Go this way a little bit, a little more out this way. And I think we're good there. Okay, now let's look at our rotations here a little bit. Smooth those out. Make sure your bias is nice and smooth. It's fine, that's fine. So now, one thing is the, let's translation, not quite as high, and so it's translate X. I actually want it to drop quicker. So a little faster. That's too fast. And this one come up a bit here. And that one, so. Okay. So now that I fixed that, I'm going to go back to the neck. Let's just check all these. Go back to the beginning here. Okay, so let's do this. A little bit bigger. A little bit bigger. Okay, now right here you'll notice it's kind of a little bumpy. So I'm actually going to kind of facilitate a little too much movement there. There we go. Move that up just a little bit. Hold on, let's look at these, rotate. That's fine. Those are all looking good. Oops. Grab those, move them down just a little bit. Arc that. Make sure my bias is right. Looks pretty good. Grab these, oops, grab these two, move them down just a little bit. I want them to overshoot just a little bit here. This will just give them a little more. This will give him a little bit more oomph into his. Move these down just a little bit. Tweak one of these just a slightly bit. Okay. So rotate Z and W, those look pretty good. Don't see any major issues here. Sometimes W doesn't do a whole lot in the quaternions here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now let's see real time.
Don't touch my stuff. This is my side of the living room, and that is your side of the living room. And must you drink straight out of the milk carton? It's disgusting.
Okay, so I'm pretty much happy with what I've got. I would actually spend a lot more time on this than I just did. Perfecting things, making things more extreme, putting in a little bit more anticipation. I mean, like these, like this one right here, like this pose right here, I'd make a lot bigger. This one I'd make bigger. That one there's a bunch of them I would just make bigger, more extreme. And this is a good example where using your graph, you can really get that kind of delayed feeling on it. Now, one thing with the hands is if I go into, if I go into the graph editor for the hands, I don't want to twin the hands. And what I've done is I've keyframed them by twinning them so that they both move at the same time. Okay, so what I actually want to do is I'm actually going to grab these keys, move them just a little bit, 2 frames back, I'm just going to move one frame forward, grab this one, grab these frames, move them one frame back. So that they're not exactly the same. Actually, I'll just move that one back. So I'm just getting a one frame kind of delay on the other one. Now that's how I mainly offset stuff. And I would go in and I would do more finger animation, more detailed finger animation, all kinds of things like that. It just takes time. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of just nitpicking every little bone that has a keyframe and making sure that they're all set up right, offsetting keyframes so that you get a nice roll in the hand or in the fingers, or you know, a lot of times when you're working FK, you end up offsetting keyframes from the shoulder to the elbow to the wrist to the fingers so that you get a nice kind of roll. With IK, you tend to keyframe it that way so that you get it that way, but you kind of go from the back out, so you actually offset the hand and then the elbow if you have an elbow control, and then to the shoulder, and it's kind of backwards that way. But as you can see in this, it's just really an organized way of keeping all your keyframes straight, making sure that they're all correct, that they're all working together, that they're smooth. And that's the main thing with finessing your animation. Like I said, this is just a brief part of finessing your animation. It would take a lot more time for me to do a really, really good job. But that's the basics of finessing your animation and making sure that things are lined up right, that the curves are going right, that your arcs are all right, that your timing is correct, that your poses are correct, because once you get into this tweaking mode, you can pose certain things differently. I can move the hands a little higher up. I can, you know, tilt the head back a little further. I can delay the neck. I can delay the spine. I can delay the shoulders. I can do all that kind of stuff with curves, and not just offsetting keyframes, but I can do it with curves too. So this is how I work, and I've found that it's a very intuitive, very good way of doing animation in Animation Master. So in the next part of the tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to facial animation, and I will show you how to do that.